Hello, good evening, and welcome to the program. This is Daily Politics on Trust TV, your go-to platform for everything politics, policy, and governance. My name is Abdullahi Ahmed. Tonight, we confront a pressing question. Is democracy failing in Africa? At a high-profile colloquium recently in Abuja, former President Olusegun Obasanjo didn't just sound the alarm. He declared democracy in Africa is dying. Then doubled down by Peter Obi, who warned that it is collapsing in Nigeria. But not everyone agrees. Bishop Matthew Kuka insists democracy is still a work in progress. So, where does the truth lie, and what does this critical take mean for Africa's largest democracy? Agbo Major is the national chairman of the New Nigeria People's Party, the NNPP. He is joining us to help navigate and unpack what this development and the stake of some of these high-profile stakeholders in assessing Nigeria's democratic space means. A pleasure to have you join us on the program. Thank you so much for your time. All right, Mr. Agbo Major will be joining us virtually via Zoom, and we're trying to re-establish a connection to the national president of the NNPP. And of course, in case you're wondering, the backdrop is around the 60th birthday of the former governor of Imo State, former lawmaker Emeka Ihedioha, where the colloquium pretty much talked about the current state of affairs in Nigeria, and we did hear quite a lot from the likes of former President Olusegun Obasanjo, the likes of Peter Obi, who doubled down to say Nigeria has gone down and under as far as its democratic values are concerned, saying that successive growth and developments have been undermined by administrations that have come on recently. He also had the takes of the likes of Senator Aminu Tambol, who pretty much paint a bleak picture of how government democratic institutions have been undermined into a state where the development leaves much to be desired. And there's the takes of the likes of Matthew Kuka and a host of others who gave a rather critical picture of democracy in Nigeria today. I think we have the national president of the NNPP back online. Mr. Agbo Major, thank you so much for joining us on Daily Politics. A pleasure to talk to you this evening. I just want to get your initial reaction to this, what has become now a reverberating conversation around democracy in Nigeria. I believe you've heard what former President Olusegun Obasanjo had to say and the host of other speakers who spoke at that colloquium. Do you agree or disagree with some of their takes about democracy failing in Nigeria?
Well, thank you so much. Good evening, viewers. Thanks for having me on this great program tonight. Well, you see, I keep saying this, that what works in a country may not be exactly what works in the next country. I feel that statement that democracy is failing in Africa is quite sweeping. One thing that we need to understand is that the peculiarities of every African country determines the mode of democracy practices. And where it fails, the people will always have an answer as to what to do to ensure that it's brought back on track. I understand that our discussions, particularly this evening, will be on Nigeria. And if you want me to answer you directly, I will be quick to tell you that democracy itself is always work in progress. It's not what is concluded in a day. It's not what, in fact, the advanced democracies we have, like the United States of America and all of that, it took them, decades to be able to perfect what is now known as the advanced democracies that they practice. And so, in Africa, coming from our history of colonialism, coming from our history of imperialist tendencies and all of that, it is not what should, or rather would be expected to work overnight. It is what we should show commitment to ensuring that the proper steps are put in place to ensure that we have a democracy that is enduring. And so I won't subscribe to the conclusion that democracy is failing in Nigeria. Like I said, the peculiarities, of our country determines how it is practiced. And so as we go along in this conversation, If there are specifics, that needs to be put forward for our viewers to listen to, we will do that. But the general statement that is failing in Nigeria, honestly, I won't subscribe to that because it's work in progress.
Right. A work in progress. That's what, for the most part, other people would willingly accept. But in terms of some of the concerns that have been raised at that colloquium, do you agree that these are some disturbing trends when it comes to targeting political opponents or even an attack on dissent, for instance, the use of state agencies to, at least apparently from what opposition political figures are saying, is that there is this systematic attempt to target dissent, whether it's in the political space or it's in the social space. Case in point, most recently, the core member who had quite a critical assessment of the state of the nation in that viral video that has generated quite a heated debate. Do you think that some of these specific criticisms, or say for instance attack on dissent and the overbearing actions of the instrumentality of government like those in the security sector means that we have to pay attention to how this has become the new normal now?
The beauty of democracy, it's the opportunity it provides for people to be able to ventilate freely. People should be able to speak freely. That is what makes democracy work properly. And so people should be able to air what they feel and what they see, and then they should also be able to point out specific areas as to where they believe that certain changes are expected to be made but are not made. And so people who have pointed out areas where we need to improve on, getting the system to work, getting government agencies to do their job and all of it, it's not completely out of place for them to have pointed that out. But what we're saying is democracy is a complete whole. It's a government that provides room for people to be able to say what they want to say. But the beauty of it is that it also requires that the people in government must also be ready to listen to what is said. And so the balance of it is that people should say things that they feel, should be said. And then the government on its part should also be prepared to listen to what is said with a view to ensuring that, what is said is listened to. And that is the beauty of democracy. But what I can tell you is that people, especially if you have a party in place in government, for instance, we have the APC government in place now, people outside the APC, of course, to be able to be seen to be doing their job, they have to, be able to speak out on things that they feel, if it were them, a party that were in power, they would be able to, do certain things that are different from what is being practiced and all of that. So they are free to say that. But what we're saying is that government should be able to, stay along the line of what do I call it, the blueprint with which they got to power. And so listening to them is not completely out of place. But what we're saying is that they should be able to, proffer solutions, say things that if it were them, this is what they would have done. For instance, the PDP, for instance, should be able to say, if we were the ones in power, we would have done this way in dealing with this. The APC, for instance, would say, okay, for us, we're in power, this is what we think should be done. The NNPP, for instance, should be able to say, okay, if we were the ones in power at the center, these are things we'll be able to do and all of that. And so the most important thing is that people are able to freely say their minds, people are able to freely ventilate, people are able to freely point at things that they feel are not being properly, done, and then also proffering solutions to, these obvious challenges, and then going further to say that, okay, if it were us, this is the best way to do it. And all. That's the beauty of democracy. And so it's not out of place for them to say that. But what I'm saying is that every party comes to power with its blueprint. Every party comes to power with its manifestos with which it campaigns, to be elected, to canvass for votes and all of that. And so that is what I think should be the right thing to do.
Right. And in talking about some of those specifics that you raised, because over the past couple of weeks, I dare say a month, Nigeria has been inundated by majorly two political developments: the situation in Rivers, and before that, the situation in the Nigerian Senate regarding Senator Natasha Potiodoran's suspension and the allegation of sexual harassment. Both have also been referenced at that colloquium in Abuja. Let me get your 2 cents on this one, because some of the speakers at that event believe a stage capture is what we're witnessing of both the legislature as the second arm of government and the judiciary as the third arm of government, and that's why the executive pretty much will do whatever it wants, including suspending an elected governor and a state legislature. What do you make about these trends and what they represent for our democratic systems?
Well, every believer of true democracy should be worried about what we're experiencing in the country today. But it's not peculiar to Nigeria alone. You go to other democracies, you see deliberate attempts by one arm of government to emasculate the other. You know, you see instances where the executive, for instance, wants to be overbearing on the legislature. The legislature, for instance, would also want to be overbearing on the judiciary and all of that. And so that's what we're seeing. Nigeria is only having a fair share of all of this. But the truth about it is that until we have institutions that are able to stand firm, everybody should be worried about what is going on. I am worried particularly that the legislature is unable to stand on its own independently to assert control over things that obviously are their primary roles. You know, the reasons why they were elected and then sent to the National Assembly and all of that. The legislature should be able to completely keep at bay the executive. The executive shouldn't have the opportunity to determine what the legislative arm of government does. But unfortunately, that's what we are seeing here. We have seen an overreach from the executive trying to exact control that are not acceptable democratically on the executive arm of government. We have also seen, the legislative arm of government. We have also seen a deliberate attempt to, squeeze breaths out of the judiciary by the executive or maybe by the legislature, trying to ensure that things are done their own way. And that negates the principles of democracy, which should completely be, a situation where the three arms of government are allowed to operate independently. And so it should be worrisome to everybody that we have a system that is modeled up together. The legislature is not independent of the judicial arm. The judiciary is not independent of the executive arm, and so on and so forth. But one strange thing that needs to be pointed out here is the fact that we have a democracy that has put the fate of the legislative arm of government and the judicial arm of government in the hands of the executive. The implication is that they are expected to go cap in hand, asking for a lifeline to be able to discharge their duties from the desk of the executive arm. So until we're able to deal with the constitutional challenges, the constitutional impediments that has created that loophole, we'll continue to have these problems. Now, narrowing it specifically to what has happened recently, the two critical issues you just talked about, I think our party has been quite clear on the situation in Rivers State. Yes, certain things may have been done to the extreme. Decisions may have been taken without looking at all sides of it. But what is important to us is that there must be peace. And so if the situation was not arrested like it was done, I can tell you that by now, the situation in Rivers would have been, a serious cause for worry for all Nigerians, because we saw signs of brigandage, breeding. We saw signs of chaos almost unfolding and all of that. We had instances where pipelines were being busted. We had instances where people were almost getting challenged in the course of doing their personal businesses, moving freely as citizens. And so it's not out of place that such a harsh and extreme decision was taken. But what my expectations were that the National Assembly, which was supposed to look wholly or holistically at the position the executive took, only came to concur. And that is worrisome. And I think that should be your worry and the concern of every other Nigerian. They tried to, speak to the executive to say, okay, for us, as far as the position is concerned, these are the things that were supposed to have been done. Yes, they haven't been done. We saw a situation where the proclamation was done even before the National Assembly's approval and all of that. So It's a thing to worry about. It's an overreach. It's an overbearing activity on the part of the executive. But like I said, until you're able to divorce the executive arm from the legislative arm and then from the judicial arm, we'll continue to have this overlapping but very negative things that are not good enough for the development of our democracy. Then on the issue of Senator Natasha Akpoti, who is allegedly under suspension, I have looked very critically at the developments that led to that, and my worries has always been that she subscribed to a working paper, that freely she would be able to operate amongst her peers as a senator. But that wasn't what happened. From the House rules, the Senate rules, we were made to understand that the Senate president has a prerogative to be able to change the seat of any senator at any given time. And that until you are seated on your proper seat, you will have no opportunity to be able to speak at the chamber of the Senate. So what I had expected Natasha to do was to simply move to her next seat, the newly assigned seat, from where she would be properly, accredited to be able to speak. And that would have given her an advantage to be able to push, sexual harassment allegations and all of that. But we saw a situation where she was trying to redress what was seemingly not acceptable to her, but approaching it from the negative side. And that took away the sympathy that she was supposed to have enjoyed. But like I said again, it's an overreach. Just a while ago, I was looking at the TV where I was told that there was an attempt to recall her and all of that. That's strange to our democracy. It has never happened. And I think INEC has taken a position of that. So, like I said, democracy is a work in progress. We will continue to checkmate all of this, and until we get it perfectly right, like we have in other countries like the US, the UK, and all of that, we'll continue to have all these skirmishes, all these disagreements. Right. So the two issues are things that shouldn't be strange to anybody. It is the approach to dealing with them that we should be worried about.
So in the final analysis, Mr. Major, what is your assessment of the status of our democracy? Are we heading in the right direction? Because the conversation is around whether we are improving, whether we are developing in terms of quality, in terms of adherence to the rule of law, separation of powers, checks and balances, good governance, and so on and so forth. In the final analysis, are we heading in the right direction?
I think so, because democracy, the power of democracy is that opportunity to disagree, to agree. Any decision taken out of very robust disagreement would always turn out to be the best decision ever taken. But the truth is that in terms of separation of power, we still have some concerns about that. But in terms of whether our democracy is evolving in any way at all, I can tell you that we're making progress, because we didn't start like this in 1999. In 1999, we had more challenges than we have now. In the First Republic, it was more difficult than what we have now. During the Second, Third, Fourth Republic, of course, we are all Nigerians. We're all here to see the hiccups, the difficulties that our democracy had in flourishing. And so I think that we haven't done badly. We are not failing. I wouldn't be party to anybody whose mindset is that our democracy is failing, because if it fails, it is all of us that have failed. And so what we need to do is to continue to massage wherever the problems are, to ensure that we're able to have a democracy that is robust enough for all Nigerians to be proud of. And so I won't say we are failing. I will only say, like I said at the beginning, that it is work in progress. And so it may not be perfect now, but I can tell you that we're making serious progress. But we have more work to do in the area of ensuring that the three arms of government are able to independently operate. The respect for rule of law you are talking about, yes, I can't see any clear breaches of rule of law like we have seen in the past. Of course, I'm not trying to say that we are not having those breaches. Yes, we're having them, but they are not as rampant and as unacceptable as they were during the past republic that I have mentioned. That is an indication that with every government in place, we are gradually making progress, and I know that it's not yet uhuru, but with time, I am sure that we'll be able to get it right, and we'll have a democracy that works, a democracy that is stable, a democracy that all Nigerians will be proud of. Our job is to continue to speak to power to ensure that the right things are done. And I call on all Nigerians to be prepared for that task ahead.
Right. Now, politicians are to a democracy what a bullet is to a gun. And most recently, the conversation around the polity has been the talk of 2027. Talks of alliances, alignments, mergers, coalitions. As the national president of the NNPP, what can you tell me about some of the feelers you're getting? The SDP has made somewhat of a comeback recently. It appears to be the darling, the safe haven of some of these departing political figures who are leaving the APC and other political parties heading in that direction. What are you hearing? What do you make of the political atmosphere concerning those coalition talks ahead of 2027?
For me, as a party administrator, I have always been worried about this trend of people talking about parties coming together to be able to confront the party in power. It has become a trend because it worked in 2015 when a faction of NNPP, a faction of Abga, and then the ACN and all of that came together to form what is today called the APC, that delivered power to President Muhammad Buhari then, which has also now delivered power to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. It has become a trend. But no Democrats, nobody would ever agree. Personally, I do not agree that that is the best way to go. The beauty of democracy is that all the political parties must be able to operate freely. They must also be able to canvass for membership. They must be able to canvass for votes. They must be able to present candidates. They don't necessarily need to come together before they are able to wrestle power from sitting governments. But they found out that it worked excellently well in 2015, and people are now thinking that that is still the way to go. But the problem is that if we continue in that direction, we will wake up one day to discover that Nigeria has become a one-party state. I can see SDP, people are leaving APC, leaving other political parties for the SDP in droves. And I can also see that attempts are being made to also collapse the identity of some other political parties into the SDP. But as a Democrat, I am not too comfortable with that. And that is why our position as New Nigeria People's Party has always been that we are not interested in losing our identity for any reason. We are true believers in democracy. We want to ensure that our identity remains intact. We should be able to field our candidates to the best that we were able to come out with and ensure that this power is restored. And one other thing that is there for me to say is that if you look at the caliber of the people that are moving into the SDP, yes, the SDP chairman, Shehu Gabam, is my very close friend. It is a good day for him that he is raking in all of these people. But the only thing that I can say is he should also be asking himself, what is the antecedents of all these people that are moving to him? At the end of the day, would they have added value to the party, or they have only come to destroy it? These are things that should be looked at. What is the antecedents of all these people who are moving towards this direction? I don't want to mention names. Nigerians know those who are going there. But the question, the principal and very critical question for my friend Shehu Gabam is, have you bothered to find out the history and antecedents of these people who are moving to you? What were the roles they played, either positively or negatively, in the parties from where they exited to come and join you? And what makes you think that you can have these people, you know, all under one umbrella and have the peace as a political party to be able to be focused on the principal target of ensuring that you wrestle power in 2027? Well, those questions are there for him to answer. I'm not a member of the SDP. I can only speak for NNPP, where I am the chairman. But for SDP, let me believe that they have their shock absorbers in place to be able to cushion the negative effects of whatever would be the backlash of this mass movement of politicians into their folds. But like I said, the way to go is not necessarily to coalesce, it's not necessarily to come together, it's not necessarily to extinguish identities of political parties to be able to wrestle power. We must have a democracy that should have as many political parties as possible existing, and those parties should be able to know what they are doing in the course of trying to wrestle power. They don't necessarily need to come together. Even if they will, let it be some form of electoral alliance, not necessarily having to collapse the identity of a political party, or not necessarily having to empty the membership of a political party. Yes, I recognize the fact that part of the beauty of democracy is that people should be able to move freely. But the way it is done in this country calls for serious concern. We must be able to ensure that our democracy survives, and the only way to do it is to ensure that the parties are not allowed to die. They should be able to operate freely. And in the course of trying to get this done, the parties must be able to continue to enjoy their individual identities.
Right.
So 2027 is around the corner. Let them continue to go. If it worked for them in 2015, and they are convinced that they would still toe the same line and that it is likely to work for them this time, Nigerians are very sophisticated. We are watching. Those of us who have been around over time, we are watching, and at the appropriate time, Nigerians will speak and then speak the truth the way it should be.
And on that note, Mr. Agbo, National President or National Chairman, I beg your pardon, of the NNPP, thank you so much for joining us on Daily Politics. Appreciate your thoughts on this all-important conversation.
Thanks for having me. God bless Nigeria.
Amen to that. And of course, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about what is on the horizon, especially for Nigeria's energy sector, because there are concerns about the petrol prices likely going up in a matter of weeks if something is not done to address the current situation with crude oil sales to domestic refineries. More on that after the break.